All right. I think we're live. We are. I'm going to try to rebroadcast a webinar. Let's see if I can get in here. Do it. Do it. Maybe.
Recording in progress.
Minutes to kind of trickle in
Whoa.
before we get it going. But we are so excited to have you all here and to kind of give some teasers and insights into what the cost of doing business report looks like, the very first one that RIA and Know How have done together. So again, welcome in to those of you who are just joining. Feel free to drop your name and where you're from in the chat. Hey, Marcy, Dominica.
Yeah, a big special hello to Dominica, who's done a whole lot of work on this survey. She's pretty incredible. Good job, Dominica.
It's always so fun sitting in webinars like this and, watching the feed scroll and it's like, oh, people that we know, and it's such a great industry, and I get excited. So, okay, well, I am not going to waste any time because I know we have a lot to get through. We're going to get everybody in and out of here in an hour.
It doesn't look like I can do it.
Again, if you're just joining us, please drop your name and where you're from in the chat. Welcome to this very special webinar, the unveiling, if you will, of the RIA Cost of Doing Business report powered by Know How. My name is Michelle Blevins. I'm the publisher of CNR and the moderator of today's event. So on behalf of myself, RIA, and Know How, thank you so much for being here. We have an amazing panel here. We have Christy Cohen, the CEO of the Restoration Industry Association, Katie Smith, who's the immediate past president and also the CEO of PHC Restoration, Anthony Nelson from Pivot My Business, and he's also the co-chair of the Independent. As possible, so please feel free to drop questions in the Q&A box. That's the easiest way for us to sort through the questions. So if you have some, please use the Q&A box versus the chat. The chat tends to scroll really fast, so Q&A is great and helps us better kind of sort through things. So I also want to let you know, I know everyone's excited to download the survey. You will get an email today with the link to download the survey, so stay tuned. It is coming. You will get that today. Okay, now I'm done talking. My part here is done. So I am going to toss it over to Christy first. Christy, thank you very much to you and your team for all of the work that has gone into this. I'm going to just have you start by telling us why this report is so important.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Michelle, very, very much for having us here and helping us launch this. We're so excited to finally come to this time where we're able to launch this new report to the industry. First and foremost, I do want to give a big thank you to all of the restorers who participated in the Cost of Doing Business survey. This would not be possible. We wouldn't be here today without all of your participation. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you to Anthony and the Independent Pricing Task Force of RIA for this was really their brainchild through Ben Justice and Anthony and others. And so just want to thank you all, as well as our partner Know How, who really brought this to fruition. So thank you everyone so very much. Really, our goal in releasing the report was to provide restorers with comprehensive financial data and key metrics to better understand the true costs of doing business in restoration and to be able to benchmark their own financial standing compared to the larger industry. This type of financial benchmarking data really hasn't been available industry-wide until now. And as the trade association for restorers, it really made sense for the RIA to lead this initiative in partnership with Know How to make this data available for the entire industry. We also really wanted to use this data to assess some of those potential misconceptions or myths about the true costs of doing business in restoration. The report really touches on data related to topics including independently created price lists, profitability related to TPA work, 10 and 10 and overhead costs, all areas that the RIA has been focusing on through our advocacy work. And so we all know that the cost of doing business in restoration, it continues to grow increasingly complex. And some of those traditional models just no longer reflect the current reality. So we're very excited to now have data and to have this report, which is really an important tool for us to be able to inform our advocacy efforts and help us really work toward a more sustainable future for restorers. I really believe this report is going to offer some essential insights that are going to help all of you with your strategic planning, looking at profitability within your own companies and your operational efficiency, and certainly employee development and succession planning as well. So very excited for today and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Beautiful. Okay. So Leighton, I'm going to kick it over to you to talk a little bit about the methodology behind this, how this all came about, what participation was like, how the data was compiled, all of that good stuff.
Thanks, Michelle. So a report like this, for it to be accurate, for it to be reliable, we really needed to bring a whole new layer of privacy and anonymizing the data to make sure that anyone who provided financials knew that that data, once collected, was going to be safe, that it was going to be ensured that that there, there would never be any kind of I would say personal identifiers. And so that's one of the first things, is that the approach to the data collection was secure. The anonymous nature of it allowed us to be able to dive deep into regional metrics, business financial metrics, but also make sure that the participants know that this is something that was going to be secure. There have been reports like this done in other industries, for example, like the National Association of Home Builders, and those reports really become these stalwart annual reports where companies can compare themselves to averages across their industry to say, well, how am I doing financially? And I can say that one of the things that was very encouraging when we look at, say, a report like the National Association of Home Builders report, which is a solid report, this in its inaugural year had over twice as many participating companies. And so we're seeing this was a very successful participation, and this was not an easy squeeze for people to participate. We're looking at data from the 2023 fiscal year. We're looking at a report compiled in U.S. currency, so this is a USD report. 84% of participants were from the U.S. And so we did have good participation from Canada, and we'll see more participation, I believe, in future years. And you're starting to see a lot of participation from RIA members, Restoration Industry Association members. Nearly 70% of participants are members of the association, and so it's just an enormous groundswell of support from those members, and very exciting. And so the report was done by finance leaders, or leaders that would have kind of a full financial picture of the business, to make sure that we had this holistic response. And by all accounts, this was a very thorough report. It was definitely one of the more detailed research projects that we've led, and so very excited to publish the report today.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So let's get into some of the key highlights. Katie, I'm going to kick this one over to you first. But Anthony and Leighton, also be thinking about what you think is a key takeaway or two from the data so far, what you've seen.
Just two. I have more than two, but I'll try to be succinct here. As we worked with Dominica on this to edit it, I went through it like maybe 3 or 4 times. Every time I found something new, but here's just a few of the big themes. We dig into that question, is bigger always better? And we give you some considerations as you work to grow your business. We find out if larger companies are more profitable. We give you some information to help you set intentional goals when it comes to the revenue and growth of your company. If you think that TPA work is the path to growth for your company, we talk about the type of impact that it has on your company and your bottom line. Spoiler alert, there is a 2-point difference in net income when TPA work is involved. So you'll have to read the study to see where that 2 points comes into play. But as you grow, you may be limited by the number of locations that you have. At some point, you're probably going to outgrow your single location and need to consider expansion. There's great information there about at what point that may happen for you. There's really good takeaways as far as the mix of revenue and the mix of service lines, and you'll have to diversify as you grow. There's really great information as far as that's concerned. We really talk about the gross profit margins of reconstruction work and the role that recon is going to play in growing a healthy, profitable business. Spoiler alert, it's important. Recon, we know, is a big pain point for a lot of restoration contractors, and a lot of people just choose to give it up altogether, or they just settle for average or below average gross profit. But we dive into steps to help you do it better. There is good money to be made in reconstruction work as long as you're investing in ways to do it better, especially when you get to projects over $50,000. That's an important number. So that's where our respondents seem to be getting into a little bit of trouble anytime they go over 50K. So company net income decreases as the average project size increases. And I'm not sure if that always has to be the case. So there's some really good considerations in there for you as you work to build your business.
Beautiful. I love it. Okay, Anthony, your turn. What are some of the key takeaways you saw as you were going through the report? It's long for those of you who are listening. I think it's over 70 pages when I remember looking through it. So there's a lot of data. So what are some highlights?
So for me, in particular, like the impact that independently created price lists can have on the bottom line. And there's a few tables in there that, you know, I was joking with Leighton, like I can't stop staring at them and trying to figure out exactly what they mean. But the impact that independently created price lists can have on your organization. And then there's a lot of correlation in ratio, you know, like ratios, right? Like we have general assumptions that when revenue goes up, certain other things will go up or go down. And this report shines a light on all of those numbers that, you know, we just anecdotally think will go down. You know, like I'll call out, you know, overhead, right? You would assume that as revenue goes up, overhead would go down. Well, sometimes yes, sometimes no. Got to read the report to find out. The other thing that I just can't let go of that's in the report is where like what impacts net income, particularly on, you know, services and the distribution of those services, right? Like your percentage of mitigation, how much mitigation. We always make the assumption that more mitigation is always better. But, you know, if you read the report and you start, you know, highlighting things and circling things and noodling on them, you'll find that might not always be the case. And so really, really compelling set of data that, you know, my chunky brain just can't let go of.
Okay, Leighton, your turn. What are some of your highlights?
You know, last week I was at the Experience conference. I was telling this story to someone in passing, and I referenced a year, and they said, "Wasn't it this year and not this year?" Like I had the wrong year, and I said, "You know what?" And I looked on my phone, and I'm like, "Sure enough." And they asked me, "How long have you been telling this story with the wrong year?" And I'm like, "Years, like a long time, right?" And I think that there are many people that are going to come into these we call myth busting moments in the report where you're going to be looking at numbers and you're going to be saying, you know, I always thought it was this, or actually I thought we were doing well in this area, and actually here we are an outlier, we're actually doing quite poorly. Or wow, you know what, let's pat ourselves on the back. The comparable data I think is going to be very interesting for people to see like an area of their business that they oftentimes, I would say, are quite reserved about, to be able to look at kind of where they fit. I think that'll be very interesting. Like many reports that we do, we wrote it with discussion questions. So, you know, each section as you go through these reports, there's opportunities for teams to discuss questions that have been posed to be able to spark dialogue and review and to kind of consider what are some of the implications. So I think that's something that's a big component of it. But in terms of what shocked me, what really jumped out, you know what, we spend a lot of time with both independent companies and franchise companies in this industry. For franchises, chopping up territories and locations is always something it's more art than science. And really thinking about how there's a term we use called essentially kind of revenue per head count per region, and starting to think around how to think about density of markets in maybe a different way, and how, you know, how much revenue you're ever able to extract based on density of markets is something that we delve into in the report as something new. I think it'll really appeal particularly to the franchise audiences. And then on the independent side, you know, we've had the opportunity to do so many detailed reports, and one theme that comes up repeatedly is around commercial work.
And I just find it always interesting to see just the disparity between desired commercial work and the actual. And then certainly, when we started to look, I think this is one of the first times as an industry we've ever been able to look into things like just average cash balances and cash positions and things like that. And so you think about lean Q1 and Q2, the strain on cash balance, the desire to move into commercial. It's such a overhead heavy industry, or every overhead heavy revenue component of the business. And so just thinking around, looking at that, kind of like Anthony said, I was looking at that one graph and just looking at, the split of assets and just thinking, okay, what does that strained cash line mean for all this commercial, let's call it desire? Again, I thought it was a really striking data point.
Okay. All right. So Leighton, you just kind of hinted toward things that were surprising. So Christy, I'm going to kick it to you next. For one, let's go back to this question that I was just asking of kind of key takeaways that you saw. And then also, was there anything that surprised you when you were going through it and thought, oh, that's not how I expected that to go?
Well, Michelle, I think for me, from my perspective, working with the AGA, right, and working with the task force groups and things on the issues that we're seeing as pain points for restorers, to me, two of the biggest areas of curiosity that I had around the data was going to be the average overhead percentage reported. And then, as Anthony alluded to earlier, what correlation, if any, was in existence with the independently created price list, meaning when you are creating your own price list and not utilizing a software provider price list, right, for your estimates and things. So those two areas, that is very exciting. I don't want to do a spoiler alert and give it away what those amounts were, but it is included in the report. And I think those are two big areas we get asked about a lot,
I can't wait to see this report. I can't wait to dig through it. It's going to be super interesting.
I think what I'm most happy about is kind of looking at the data and talking with Anthony and some others. It seems to be on par with what their expectations were. So it makes me feel good that we hit the nail on the head in terms of the data that we collected there.
Anthony, what would you say to that? Were there any surprises, or was it mostly, yep, that's kind of what we expected to see, and this data is going to help back up a lot of arguments, so to say?
So kind of the surprises that I came across, right? As revenue increases, a couple different things. When you look at the assets to support a larger organization, you would expect that there would be a disproportionate amount of assets on that balance sheet to support all of that activity. But as a percentage, there is some nuance there, but directionally, it's kind of the same. And where you see assets start to increase in parallel with revenue is actually really surprising. I think, if you look at that table, everybody's going to go, what? Holy crap. Oh, that makes sense. I got it. And then the other thing that really caught me by surprise was, as revenue goes up, the size of the organization, you do tend to see an impact on gross margin one direction or another. But, net income, it tends to shake out in the wash, so to speak, a little bit, right? And there's some nuance there, but I kind of expected some different outcomes there.
Katie, your turn. Any surprises?
Yes, which is surprising because I was part of the decision making on this, but I am surprised at how many amazing RIA resources are included in this report to the general industry, whether you are a member or not. There is an oldie but a goodie in there that a lot of people don't know about, but we have volunteers who spent hundreds of hours on creating the Accounting and Financial Management Guidelines resource, which is incredible. And so we're giving that away as part of this report. And there's some TPA resources and some AGA resources as well. So historically, these have just been for RIA members, but it's time to get it into the hands of the industry so that we can all build a better community for all of us. So those are some things that I was kind of surprised to see, but also knowing that we're taking this report and then our AGA teams are going to be getting the information here and then doing even more with it. So I know that there's even more resources to come. So if you're not an RIA member yet, this is our gift to you, and you can see what we do to advance the industry. And hopefully that would compel you to say, this is an association that I want to get behind and that I want to be a part of. There was one other thing in this survey that it didn't surprise me, but I've never seen the numbers to support it yet. And that's what the data tells us about companies who spend more money in training and development opposed to those who don't. So it was really nice to finally see a number put together with that. So all kinds of good nuggets hidden throughout the survey for sure.
Perfect. Okay, Katie, sticking with you because you were talking a lot about resources in that answer. So how can restorers use this report for strategic planning for their business?
Yeah, I was thinking about that because this is the time of year, October, November, where everyone's got their strategic planning sessions on the books, getting ready for the next year, looking into the future, thinking about what they want their company to look like over the next few years. And if I'm thinking about growing my business, I'm looking 1, 3, and 5 years out. And so there's a couple of things that I would take into consideration just based on what I've read in this report. So the first thing I want to look at is how much I can expand in my current facility. And then I kind of want to be thinking about what my revenue goals are and if the real estate that I have supports that, and if my market alone supports that, or if I need to be branching out into another territory. So I also want to be thinking about what my residential and commercial mix needs to be. But as Anthony says, taking some of those financial metrics into account as well and getting a firm understanding of some of the implications of increasing my commercial mix as well. I want to be thinking about the kind of impact that independently created custom price lists can have on my business. There is some eye-opening information there. If I'm not currently doing that, I'm going to get started in the next year. That's going to be part of my strategic plan for the coming year. If reconstruction is a big part of my revenue, I want to know if I'm doing it well. I want to know how I can do it better because I know there's ways to do that. I want to look at where I'm allocating my project management time. That's a big part of this report as well, is where are you putting your PMs? Are they in cost of goods? Are they in overhead? If you're just lumping them into overhead, your projects may not be as profitable as you think they are. So maybe I can improve my job costing.
That was a huge comment there. Yeah, if you are not job costing your project managers or your superintendents or that management of these projects, you are showing more profit per job than you actually have. I think that was a key insight right there.
Breaking that down and what I can do in the next year. And even more than that, what can I do? What's most important in the next 90 days to start getting me to where I want to be? But every section in this survey ends with a header that says discussion questions for teams. And if there's something in there where you read it and you say, I'm not exactly where I want to be right here, there's questions to start asking yourself and to ask your leadership team that will help you get where you want to go. So really amazing resource. Everybody just needs to download it, make it part of your next coming weeks to just really start digging through it and see how you can implement it in your business in the next year.
All right. And I know everybody is anxious to download it. So you will have a link in your email today. Stay tuned. It is coming. We promise. We wanted to get through the webinar first. If you have questions as we're going, again, feel free to drop those in the Q&A.
I will not be passing on that link. So you better get signed up at the RIA to get that.
Things. What are some ways that restorers can hopefully take this into maybe some of their operations meetings? Or Katie kind of hinted at a few of them, but what do you see?
Like there's a whole section of data on, call it staffing, right? And overhead structures and, where employees are being recruited from either internally or externally, and there are, being in the industry for 2 decades, right? Like I have my own bias, right? And that bias is created based off of the successes that I experienced, right? It's one data point. When you look at that, like if I just compare my institutional knowledge with the data presented in the report, there's a lot of things that show up that challenge that intuition that's baked inside of me. And one of the things that we're in a growing industry right now. And I think anybody who's not looking at the value that outside talent from outside of the industry could bring to their enterprise is maybe missing the boat a little bit. And the data here tends to suggest that. Also, when you start slicing up the way that organizations are structured and how much human capital you're investing into each of the individual buckets between marketing, sales and business development, project managers, estimators, accounting, HR and admin, right? Like there's a ton of data here that suggests what is normal and customary and kind of leans towards what does good look like. And so if you're saying, look, I've got a growth plan, I want to be double this size in 2, 3, 5 years. Okay, you've got to start investing in those resources early, and there's data points in the cost of doing business report that suggest what good looks like in areas where you should be investing in. And yeah, those are like from an operational perspective, those are my key takeaways.
Beautiful. Thank you, Anthony. All right, Leighton, your favorite topic, professional development. So how can restorers take some of the data and information in the report for their professional development? Katie even hinted toward this is the first time where we're seeing the result of what training and education brings to a team. So how can people take action on the data?
So number one is the timing of the report is it's no coincidence that it lands in the fall. And that's because, as Katie mentioned, is that so many firms are going into this planning cadence already, or if you don't have a planning cadence, this is when you should go into a planning cadence, right? And so this report is well timed. Number one is, how do you get people in your company to care about your numbers, care about your financials? I think that's kind of that perennial question is like, how do you get people that care? And, maybe you don't have a kind of let's call it a profit share, or you may not have shared ownership. How do you get people to really care about the numbers? Well, for me, it comes down to motivation, and motivation is this balance between commitment and competency. And this report is all about investing in that competency of the numbers and the financials, building interest in the industry. For many of us, our staff, they're not aware of how large and how expansive this industry is. And so a report like this really takes the blinders off, and they say, this is a complex industry, right? There's a lot going on here. There's a lot of companies out here. Did you know there's a company out here that does over $100 million of business? I mean, I think number one is just that knowledge is power. The second thing is I think that you have to make reading the report a good use of paid time, right? This isn't, hey, here's a copy of the report. By the way, read it on the weekend when I'm not paying you. That's, I'm watching my margins here. I got this financial report, right? I think that you have to say, hey, no, reading this report is a good use of time, and for roles in your company. And then I think it's important that leaders are going to have to do something that they maybe haven't done before, is bring a level of transparency around their numbers and be willing to start to share some of those top line numbers. I think that it's probably not a stretch to say that many staff probably have no financial sense of where the business is at, period. Right? Maybe some of the projects that they're involved in, but how does that all roll up into kind of the financial picture of the business? And the fact is that there is a measure of transparency that has to come down to the staff so they can kind of, compare between the business and the averages. And I think that one of the things that we showed in a report we did, a couple of years ago is that staff don't want the business to fail, in that just broadly across the entire industry, teams want the company to be successful. And so the ability to disclose a measure of information that and then hand this to staff, I think, is very powerful. Senior leaders can add context. They can add context to the numbers, context to where they stand, how this relates to their thinking. Some of our potential current kind of net income isn't where we want it to be, or some of our asset mix isn't where we want it, but it's because we've been making some investments over the years. We've been taking on some liabilities, so there's context. But young people coming in, they bring this amazing objectivity. Sometimes when you don't know, you can just put your finger on numbers that people have been kind of avoiding in that monthly financial analysis. And we kind of dust over that, and they can put their finger on that and say, why is our AR out of control? I didn't know that, right? And so being able to bring that objectivity in, and hey, as an AI software provider, the incoming workforce are always good at identifying where tools can be brought in to bring efficiencies to the business. So I think there's just a general opportunity.
I think that point bears repeating, that if your employees If the people that work for you and your company don't know the numbers, they can't help you fix the numbers. So that's I like what Leighton just said. Share this stuff with your crew. Share your numbers. Open the books. A lot of owners are afraid that they're gonna look like, "Oh, I'm making too much money and my people are gonna revolt." But at the end of the day, if you've got problems, most of your problems are numbers based, right? You need your people to know those numbers so they can be a part of the solution.
They plan to use the study? We know we've talked about how operations can use it in professional development, business owners. What's the RIA's plan with the study itself? And are there going to be others in future years and all of that? What does the future look like with the report?
Absolutely. So the first thing that I absolutely want to hit home is we would like to do this report on an annual basis, partnering with Know How. And just as we've seen with other industry reports, the CNR State of the Industry report, the data and the insights that we're going to be able to glean, especially trend data over time of how we are progressing as an industry, is critically important. So this will be on an annual basis, and we need participation. I mean, for our first inaugural report, it was great, but we can do so much more as we continue to grow. So that's something I really want to encourage everyone. You know, as Leighton said, we were very good about the anonymity and having all of the protocols in place that you can feel confident in participating. But we're only going to get better with the data that we have and the more participation that we have on an annual basis. From an advocacy standpoint, you know, we've always suspected certain things around overhead, profit, cost of doing business. Now that we have some data to support our talking points and some of our positions, you know, this report helps us along in that endeavor, right? We've put out position statements on needing to have the ability to deviate from customized price lists, right? Now we can see from a data perspective, how is that in implementation, right? For restorers who are actually independently creating their own price list, what does it mean for them in terms of profitability? What's the impact that that's having? So that helps to inform us in that conversation. I think the other big conversation as we work with our carrier relations task force and understanding where the industry is going, certainly the 10 and 10 model, right, that has been embraced by the insurance industry. Now we have some data to show where we truly are as an industry on what those overhead realities are. That can kind of help bolster when we're having our communication with carriers and others in the ecosystem to say, maybe it's time to rethink certain things. So this is helping to validate where our positions are with our advocacy work and something that we're going to use in a proactive way. The other thing I will say too, and this has been really important for us, is we really recognize how important it is for restorers to truly understand their costs. Are you really understanding your markup and your margin and understanding how that is impacting you? You know, it's really prompting restorers to look under the hood, right?
It still surprises me how many people don't know the difference between a markup and a margin and think that if they're marking something up 20%, they're making 20%, and they're not. They're just not. That still surprises me to this day.
You know, you're doing all of the things to maximize your profitability and to really understand where you are as a company with your margin and markup. So this, I think the report just helps to bolster that for all restorers and helps us kind of support that mission of educating restorers.
I totally echo what you said about it's going to get really exciting as we see historical data and have comparison points, and those graphs start having multiple points on them where we can see the data over the years. That gets really exciting, and this year's is already exciting. So kudos to everybody who participated. Thank you for participating this year. All right, any final comments before we wrap it up? Katie, Anthony, Leighton, Christy, I know you're just chatting and I think you shared a lot, but is there any final comments here?
Just one thing that stands out to me, it's kind of interesting because you can look at the demographics and you can put together who the average restorer is. But something that stood out to me is the longevity and the amount of years that the overwhelming majority of people that took this survey have in the industry. We're looking at the 11 to 20 year mark, and I've only got like 1 year left in that box before I move to the next one. But over the last few years, we've seen a lot of change in our industry. We've seen some people exiting, but I don't think we've seen anything in this regard to what we're going to see probably in the next 5+ years. And I think there's only a certain lifetime that you have in this industry. It is so complex. And I think that when you put that together with the training and development of your management and leadership team, and really starting to think about what your exit plan is in this industry and who's going to step in whenever you're ready to leave, because that time is probably not that far off for most of us. So to me, it's just interesting to see who is the average restorer, and the average restorer has been here for 20 years. And so they're probably thinking about who is the next average restorer coming in their shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just add to that what Katie's saying, I think is so important, because last week we did kind of a pre-release of this new book we have about building leaders. I'm trying to make a book plug, but it's really focused on that the existing cohort of restorers need to think about their succession plans in a way that they probably, in a level of urgency that they probably haven't thought about. And strong economies have balanced incentives, as we all know. And the question is how do we incentivize the next generation of restorers to come up and see this as an industry where not only can they make a career, but they can make a life, and they can make a very lucrative career. I think that's very important, that they can see that kind of what that trajectory looks like. So I would just challenge those that perhaps are more in that cohort that Katie was describing, like kind of 20 years, you're kind of in that bracket, to think about like not just how do I get my hands on this report, but who in my company am I going to personally kind of mentor through this report? I'm going to make it a point this fall, and I'm going to kind of talk through these results this fall to add context and color. What is this 10 and 10 thing? And I don't understand, why is the liability asset mix like the way it is, and what does that mean in our business? And this is a complex business, and I think that I'm hoping that this tool arms seasoned restorers for a lot of mentoring conversations that I think are a necessary component of just a whole wave of succession that has to be done very effectively over the next 5 to 10 years. And we'll do our part. We're gonna work very diligently to make sure that the data is reliable, that it's approachable, it's digestible, it's plated well. But at the end of the day, it really falls to leaders who, when they read this report, it brings to mind experiences and good decisions and bad decisions. But I think they have to be willing to sit down over a cup of coffee with the incoming leaders of their company and just say, this is what this means for us. And to Katie's point earlier, what does this mean 1 year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? I'm excited for that.
Anthony, anything you want to add before we wrap it up?
The report makes a nod directly to the impact that the RIA can have on an organization.
Mm-hmm.
But indirectly, as you walk through table after table, you can see how the initiatives of the RIA are aligned with creating better outcomes for restorers. And I would just say, look, if you're sitting here on the call today and you haven't considered becoming a member of the RIA, download the report. You don't have to be. Go ahead, download the report. But as you walk through it and you understand what we're trying to drive forward for the industry, you'll start to see, look, like we're aligned with you in everything that's important. And we want the world of restoration to be better for you. The other thing, and this is, I'm going to go off into super hypothetical land on this. I just read a book. There's a biography by Henry Ford, and he has 2 chapters in this book that talk about the beauty and the elegance of doing the work. And there's no doubt in my mind that the individuals who took the time, energy, and effort to prepare the data to submit to the cost of doing business report learned something about their organization in preparing the data to submit to the cost of doing business report, let alone the output of all the findings that show up. And I think in busy schedules and busy days, we try and find the most efficient way to execute the work. But a lot of the times we're operating agnostic of the value that doing the work can provide to us as individuals. And so if you looked at participating at some point and you went, oh my gosh, too hard to do, I would encourage you to look at it through the lens of what is the opportunity cost to me and to my organization by not participating. And there's value in doing the work and participating in initiatives like this.
Perfect. Okay, beautiful. All right, before we wrap it up really quick, Christy, let people know where they can go. Obviously, everybody who's here, everybody who registered is going to get an email with a link to download the report. But beyond that, for people who aren't here, or people that want to be able to spread the word, where is this report going to live? How can other people not here today get access to it?
Absolutely. So in partnership with Know How, RIA has under advocacy, download the cost of doing business report right there for everyone to download, as well as the website costofrestoration.com. That's where they can also download copies of the report and stay tuned for following years signups. You can even sign up now to pre-register to take the survey in 2025. So while it's fresh, top of your mind, just, you can check that out. But so it will be across both of those places. We'll be promoting on social, and just appreciate it. And it's certainly, we welcome the feedback. This is our first time around on the survey. So if folks have questions that maybe we didn't answer this time around, or that you'd be interested in seeing in future surveys, please feel free to contact myself or Leighton's team at Know How, so that we can make it even better for next year.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here. This is being recorded, so if you want to share it with people later, there's going to be links kind of floating around everywhere, and clips and snippets and all of that. The report will be available today. So thank you so much everyone for attending, and we wish you well and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
All right, super interesting, super excited to get my copy of that report. If you want to get your own copy of that report, that was the URL right there, costofrestoration.com. I'm just gonna plug that in there right now. Costofrestoration.com. There it is, and just fill out the form and download it. Yeah, right there. I'm going to get my copy. I'm going to go through it. I'm going to see if my good friend Chris Nordyke wants to review this for our Rebel office hours here at 1 p.m. Pacific. But otherwise, hope you all doing well. We will see you.